Hello everyone and welcome to my sunroom on this cold, cloudy day here in East Tennessee. This week we've been in a deep freeze and a lot of the United States has had unusually cold temperatures with this Arctic blast. I hope all of you are staying safe and warm. This is the coldest weather I can remember here in East Tennessee for many years. Last year we had a very mild winter and I didn't have to change much with my setup in my sunroom or with my orchid care. I pretty much had everything set up, the heating, the humidifier, and it didn't change much last winter. But this winter, I've had to change things up. It's always better to be prepared, but I want this to be helpful to you all who are experiencing very cold weather. I get a lot of questions about how I care for my orchids in this room with this setup when it gets very cold. So I'm going to try to give you as many tips and as much information as I can. One thing that I did when the weather turned very cold was I pulled the tables away from the windows just a bit. There are so many windows in this room that the area right in front of the windows can get really cold when the temperatures dip into the teens with the wind chill. So I thought it would just be wise to pull them away from the windows and let the warm air from the heat vents keep the area around them warmer. I also use one of the radiant heaters all winter long, but I added another one. So let me show you what those look like. This is a portable electric oil radiant heater. And like I said, I usually keep one of them back here all winter long, but I added another electric oil heater in this room. And I placed both of them in the center of the room and under the ceiling fan so that the heat will circulate throughout the room, so that I don't get any cold spots and hot spots in this room. These heaters don't take moisture out of the air, so they work really well in a grow room like this. The heater heats oil inside this heater and it radiates the heat instead of it being a forced fan heat that makes the humidity go down in the room. So I try to keep this room 70 degrees, and that's 21 degrees Celsius. I keep the heating unit in my house at 70, and there are heat vents in this room. But I also add these heaters to keep it at 70, especially at night or on days when the sun just doesn't come out. I also had to add another humidifier, so I've been running 2 humidifiers 24/7 on the highest setting that I can. And that's keeping it around 30% humidity, and that's a victory. So I really need to buy a more substantial humidifier. It's a job keeping these filled all the time. So that's my next purchase for my sunroom. And as you see, I have my wet paper towels on some of my orchids' air roots to help keep them hydrated. And this really does help them in the winter. I did a video a few weeks ago about how to keep your air roots hydrated in the winter, and I'm going to place a link to that video in the description box below. I go through a lot of tips on air roots and humidity in that video, so I'll provide a link for you. And now let's go over watering. When the heat cuts on really often and the humidity is lower, I check to make sure that it's not drying out the orchid pots. I check on them really often when the weather is very cold or when it's very hot. I just don't want to find a pot that should have been watered a few days ago because the weather has been extreme. You don't really think about it much in the winter, but I've noticed that especially my orchids in moss will dry out when the humidity is low. The other thing that's different right now is there's been very little sunlight along with this bitter cold. The spikes aren't growing anymore. They're all blooming or in full bud. The leaves aren't growing and the roots aren't growing. So at this point, I'm just feeding with cow mag and seaweed extract. I don't skip the Better Grow fertilizer for very long, maybe just a few weeks, or I might give them a small amount of Better Grow, maybe a quarter of a teaspoon per gallon of osmosis water. But they're not growing right now, so they're not feeding as much right now. In a few weeks, it should be warming up some. I'm hoping so. And when we have some pretty sunny days, I'll be fertilizing them regularly again. So it's really helpful to keep an eye on the weather and think about what your orchids need at this point in the latter part of winter. Last winter was completely different here. The weather was good, it was much warmer, and I just kept feeding them regularly. But it's important to look at what's going on with your plants and your environment and your weather and judge what they need according to that. And in a few weeks, I might be telling you, wow, the weather has completely changed. It's warm, it's sunny, and everything is growing again. I hope so. And then I'll be fertilizing again and everything will kind of go back into its normal routine. And if I had grow lights, I would definitely be using them now. There was a question a few weeks ago on my channel about grow lights, and I've never used them. And one of my subscriber friends, Shirley, answered that question. So here's a big shout out for Shirley. She said to use full spectrum lights, and you can find them on Amazon. Type in grow lights for orchids. So again, thank you so much, Shirley. So those are some of my reflections about extreme winter weather and growing orchids. It is a challenge to grow orchids when it's cold, but there's always that promise of spring. It's in 29 days. I can't wait. And look at the blooms on my Val Sogo Tahiti sunsets. They're absolutely beautiful. I just really do appreciate the color that orchids bring to these cold winter days. And my latest subscriber question, what I'd like to hear from you all, is which one of your orchids is the easiest to grow? It's just not fussy, it just grows and blooms for you every year like clockwork. Then please share that with me. I have had some great comments on that question so far, so keep them coming. My friend Sharon Holmes says that Oncidium Sherry Baby is awesome. It smells like chocolate and vanilla. How can you go wrong with that? So who knows, that might be my next purchase. And thanks to everyone for leaving comments. I so enjoy reading my comment section. I have the best comments on my channel. You all are just awesome. And I like it when you let me know where you're from in the world. I have subscribers the world over, and it's so much fun to know which state or country you're from. And if you need orchid advice, this is really important. It helps me to know how to help you better. And before we end the video today, I would love to say the blessing over you and your family and your orchids. The Lord bless you and keep you. Make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face toward you and give you his shalom peace. You all make it a great day. We'll see you next time.